Hello and welcome to Afterlife Topics and Metaphysics. This is Cyrus, and I know some people wanted updates about my health and what's going on, so I'll just begin with that. Since the prior video I was talking about how I highly suspected that I had the virus that will not be named because apparently YouTube censors any video that mentions the biggest news story in 50 years. So I will just call it the C virus. But since that video, I've had a lot of fluctuating symptoms, and this is now day 8. And I actually woke up today with a lot of neck pain. And this was a big concern for me because that can be a symptom of meningitis. And if you want to know how deadly that can get, just read Eben Alexander's story, Proof of Heaven. And so I didn't really want to mess around with that, so I did go to a doctor. I did not get tested for C virus because, for one thing, there's no tests available. And also, if I were tested positive, I'd be put in some isolation chamber in a hospital without many hygienic features. So anyway, I did have a secondary infection. I am on antibiotics, but it was not related to the neck pain. Neck pain may be just a different way that the body is fighting off the infection, fighting off the virus. I guess it happens sometimes as things move around the body. Point is that I haven't really gotten over this. I've been very tired most days. Sluggish feeling, fevers coming and going. I cannot say that day 8 is much better than day 4. But I definitely, I'm beating it. It's just, kind of takes it out of me. So I've been thinking a lot about this, stressed about this, and haven't been able to put as much time into making the videos and doing the work I usually do. In addition, I've been banned again off of Facebook. I think I just now got my account back, but that's made me less active there as well. Also, apparently freaked a bunch of people out because I was, telling people or announcing my sickness, and then suddenly I disappeared off Facebook, and so I had some old friends like freaking out about that. So it's been very frustrating, and I've been caught up in one problem after another, and haven't been quite on the ball. But here I am now, and I want to talk about the non-physical properties of DNA. And thanks for bearing with this. I had to do the health update before we go into the main topic, which, what better topic? Because right now, we're facing this global crisis, and it all comes down to DNA, doesn't it? And what most people are not aware of is that DNA, which is the most key pivotal part of our bodies and what makes us who we are, have amazing non-physical properties. And so I spoke about this a lot in my second book, The Afterlife and Beyond. And there's other things too I didn't even touch on in that book, but I figure I will reference it from this website, which is the Foundation for Mind Being Research, where science meets consciousness, FMBR. And then there's a great old article here from 2012 that summarizes some of this research. Very interesting stuff. So before we jump into this, a couple more announcements. I want to just address a couple things from people leaving comments. Some people are upset because of the ads on this channel. I will say that whatever I make from the ads from a channel this small, $50 a month maybe, that little bit of money really helps my morale. If you really, really hate seeing an ad and clicking on skip ad, maybe you shouldn't even be on YouTube. So the people telling me they're unsubscribing, they don't watch me now because there's ads, this is the way commerce works. It's just the way it has to be. I put work toward this channel and this community, and knowing that I can put a little bit of money toward my food, or pay a bill at the end of the month with that, really helps my morale. So I'm not going to take the ads off the channel. That being said, some people have reported seeing as many as 3 ads per video. So that is an issue because I don't put up 3 ads per video. That is literally YouTube skimming off the top or putting more ads than I'm requesting, which is super sketchy. But a lot of creators have been complaining about that. And so in that case, Well, geez, what can I do about that? That's just YouTube screwing all of us over. Next issue, I want to give a quick shout out to the guy in the trolling the comments feed accusing me of not really being sick. I just wonder how it is that people can become such scumbags. You know, and most of y'all I love on the comments section, but it just takes a special kind of scumbag to attack me, come after me, accusing me of faking being sick. I don't know where these people, I don't know how people end up this in such a terrible, becoming such terrible people in life. Like, is it a single event in childhood? Is it many events? Is it a past life thing? What is it that makes certain people here in the YouTube comments especially, into such just raving lunatic scumbag, whatever, just total losers to do that kind of thing. And so of course I removed that idiot from the channel, but I have to grow thicker skin, I think, to be able to start dealing with some of these types of people. It just astonishes me. Anyway, so let's continue with this article, Consciousness and Our DNA. And oh yeah, by the way, please subscribe to this channel if you like these types of subjects, want to keep this work going. Okay, so most people think of our DNA as solely a molecular structure that chemically codes for making the components of our body. However, research is now demonstrating that it's much more than that. It's also a transmitter of signals that carry information. With the fairly recent decoding of DNA in our genes via the Human Genomic Project, scientists thought that now we will have a full understanding of life as dictated by our genes. Unfortunately, the number of genes we possess is not that different in most living organisms, so we're not so special. Humans have about 23,000 genes, about the same number as found in mice and earthworms. But we do have a lot of junk DNA. Quote, junk DNA, that scientists did not understand, since they were not the genes that coded for the proteins and enzymes that make up and build the body, hence the term junk. We are now beginning to understand that the so-called junk DNA appear to act as regulators that control the information and affects the operation of our body and hence its health. This understanding is creating a new field called epigenetics. It also appears that our intentions and thoughts become control knobs for changing the channel for the DNA signal. Now, this is where we get into the really wild stuff when we talk about the specifically non-physical properties of DNA. Can intention, thought, and photons, light, and things like this, and even digital signals regulate, affect, and manifest elements of DNA. And there's some very sophisticated experiments that demonstrate that the answer is yes. So, DNA instructions carried by light. Basically, this article summarizes quickly summarizes three areas of research. So first, we have Dr. Vlail Kaznachiev. So this was Russian guy, I believe, director of the Institute for Clinical and Experimental Medicine in Novosibirsk, showed that a virus can be transmitted from one culture plate to another using ultraviolet light. Thus, information is being carried with photons that have been structured. Excuse me. I'm still kind of sick doing this, you guys. You gotta bear with me. I'm not on my A game for this video. I'm trying to get back on the saddle again. I'm probably gonna look at this video when it's done and just be like, man, I look messed up. Anyway, can be transmitted from one culture plate to another using ultraviolet light. Thus, information is being carried with photons that have been structured in one culture plate to another culture plate. Some Russian scientists believe that this effect is being carried out by a torsion energy-based field. So what does all that gobbledygook mean? It basically means you can you can teleport a virus using photons, just by allowing the photons to carry the information of the virus from one place to another. It doesn't mean you should avoid the sunlight because it's going to spread your illness all over the place. It means, but it means that Basically, it's a continuation of studies from other people who have done similar things, not just with light, even with digitizing DNA. So next we have Dr. Zhang Kanzheng in China showed that a light passed through a duck into 500 chicken eggs, resulting in chicks which 80% of which had flat bills, 90% had eyes, moved to a position similar to ducks, and 25% had webbing between their toes. Their offspring remained partial duck, partial chicken. So they made these chicken ducks using light passing through a duck into the chicken eggs. This is it's pretty wild because it's almost like this is something you could think of could happen in nature, but it's happening just through light and one animal and a bunch of eggs. So next, one of the most famous experiments was Dr. Gariev and the famous salamander egg experiment, kind of a continuation of the chicken duck egg experiment. He directed green laser light through salamander eggs and then through frog eggs. Well, guess what? Salamanders hatched from the frog eggs. He has thus coined the term wave genetics. So pretty awesome stuff. It's also not where the story ends. We go into Dr. Luc Montagnier, who I discussed quite a bit in my second book. Montagnier was among the discoverers for the HIV virus. He's one of the most respected virologists in the world. That is, of course, until he went into alternative science, which brought the materialist establishment to basically come after him. But that aside, he had probably some of the most fascinating experiments that I have come across. So he discovered the apparent ability of DNA fragments to regenerate themselves using an electromagnetic field. Two separate tubes were placed in a copper coil and subjected to an electromagnetic field of 7 Hertz. One tube had a DNA fragment and the other tube had just pure water. After 16 hours, the tubes were subjected to a polymerase chain reaction, or PCR, to create replicants of the DNA, the standard technique that enzymatically makes many copies of DNA to enable measurement of DNA that is originally in a small quantity. The DNA was found in the tube with just pure water. The hypothesis is that the DNA structure is preserved and amplified through quantum coherence in the water tube. The PCR process makes it for the DNA itself. You can also put Google DNA teleportation experiments. There's a lot more that goes into that, including teleporting DNA through a computer system, and I reported about that in my second book. So this is just the tip of the iceberg. Really wild experiments with not only transferring DNA, teleporting DNA, regenerating DNA, and affecting, for example, embryos, eggs, and things through these means of altering DNA. So the article continues about the mechanism. So without going into all of this, what I will say is that if you look at all these experiments together and you also look at the greater methods of how consciousness affects life, and we look at, for example, the experiments of negative and positive energy on plant growth. If you think loving thoughts to a plant, it tends to grow better. And we also look at the new field of epigenetics, which has to do with how thoughts can affect how our offspring arise, and it's not a purely random, mechanistic, Darwinian process, as has always been believed. We begin to get a model of nature that is a very, I wouldn't say complete idealism, but it really shows how affected it is by the power of consciousness, the power of thoughts. It puts consciousness and thoughts into a forefront of the natural progression of life on the planet. So very much directed by thought. So we can go into the philosophical territory if you want to think about consciousness itself as God. And then maybe you're giving some credence again to religion when I talk about, God created this beautiful animal. Well, maybe God did not create it, but the collective consciousness did, the collective desire to create a species of a certain kind. And what is the evolutionary mechanisms behind that? Could this explain why some animals seem to have evolved so precisely? It would be very difficult to imagine this happening in any kind of random fashion. Have you ever seen one of those stick bugs, the ones that look exactly like a stick? And you think, well, how many random mutations would it take? And how many of these, whatever mantises had to be killed and eaten before the ones that look like a stick, well, pardon my pun, stick around? And, well, it's I certainly respect the theories of natural selection, that the ones that didn't look like a stick were seen by predators, were eaten off, and over millions of years you begin to get stick bugs. But I also would find it just as likely that the consciousness of those mantises, or whatever it is that the stick bug originated from, collectively decided that, hey, I would be able to survive much better if I looked like a stick. And that may have sped the evolutionary process up so that you get all those wild and fantastic creatures that we see in nature. It's one way of looking at it from a less materialist point of view. Final point is that DNA does appear to have these non-physical properties, which will hopefully someday help to revolutionize nature, sciences, and all of these things. But we're a long ways off, because we still have to bust out of the old paradigm before we can begin to embrace the new sciences, I should say the true sciences that understand the importance of consciousness and ultimately encompasses that and many of the other subjects that we talk about on this channel. Thanks for watching, and that's I think all I have for this video. I'm gonna go pass out, go to bed, and when it comes to consciousness and DNA, it's something to think about if you happen to get sick with anything, even if it is the virus that shall not be named, because your thoughts can have an effect on what are basically DNA encoding mechanisms. That's why they were able to recreate a virus using light beams. I mean, a virus is neither dead nor alive. It's somewhere in between life and death, but it's like almost like a computer program, but it's a DNA encoding machine. And your thoughts of all things should be able to have some kind of an effect on that, right? Meditation when you're sick, something to try out. So if you like this, check out afterlifetopics.com. Books like Understanding a Life After Death, The Afterlife and Beyond, and a lot more content on there. Get involved with me. Buy a coaching session. I can discuss whether that's enhancing your contact with the other side or initiating out-of-body experiences, and a host of things like that. And well, I guess that's it. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys on the next video.